Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this particular video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Sagittarius on the 11th of June 2025 at 7:45 UTC. So before I get on with that, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you who support me. I couldn't do without that. Gives me the energy to come out here and do more and more. I really appreciate your comments. And please subscribe if you're new to my channel because it helps us to grow. So what do we know about this full moon in Sagittarius? Well, it's called the strawberry moon, and that is simply because certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, where all these full moons are given their names, they come from the kind of native cultures. Then, of course, this was strawberry, not just strawberry growing season, but the time when the strawberries are ripe and delicious and beautiful. It's almost midsummer. So the idea of a full moon here seems to be somehow a joyous full moon, doesn't it? Strawberries always gives one a feeling of great pleasure. And actually, this particular full moon isn't aligned to Uranus or Neptune or Saturn or any of the planets that tend to give an impression that this is going to be a time of great difficulty or challenge. We're free of those. That being said, if you want to listen to my other video, which goes into the detail of whatever else is going on at the time, you'll see there are some pretty big and important astrological developments, and they will go hand in hand with some very important global developments. And should any of those particular aspects connect with your chart, then you too will have a very important period. And maybe you even know that what's coming up around the time of the full moon is going to be very important for you. But sometimes even if you don't, full moons bring things to a head. And sure enough, it does become one of the more important days of the year. So yes, all full moons are about closure and completion. When we think about the sun and the moon, they are opposite each other. The sun on one end, moon on the other, earth in between. So there is this idea of polarity, things being at as far away from each other as they could be. But at the same time, there's this sense of unity, what opposites attract. And that's why full moons have an aura of bringing people together, every bit as much as they have of separating people and creating division. That's the theme of a full moon. But a full moon is also about tying up things that need to be closed off, done and dusted, clearing a space for something else to continue. And this particular full moon is the end of a cycle that began on December the 1st last year with the new moon in Sagittarius. So we've got about 6 months between the two. So you may be able to absolutely marry up these two periods of time. Oh, guess what? In December, this happened. I did this was what went on. And now look at where we are 6 months later. It's done and dusted, finished. And either it's a happy ending or it's like, this is where it took us and it's not so great. And of course, we see this so often closely mirrored with relationships, the idea that something begun, two people come together, and they are a new moon, as it were. By the time we get 6 months apart, they're opposite. Now, do opposites unite or do they separate? Which is why often 6 months into a relationship is a very make or break time, as indeed is 3 months into a relationship, although that's really for other reasons. This is more to do with the timeline of that kind of dopamine and everything else that's going on when we meet someone and the world is turning on its axis because we've met that person. Well, that sort of stabilizes about 3 months in. And at that point, we think, well, what was I thinking of? Or, wow, have I ever got the right person? So this idea this idea of beginnings and endings is sort of uniquely represented or symbolized by this new moon, full moon cycle. So let's get on with it. Oh, one more thing I want to talk about, and that's the general kind of meaning of this particular full moon. If we think about the astrological or the zodiacal circle, and we begin with Aries, we get to Taurus, we get to Gemini. The sun is in Gemini, the moon at the opposite point in Sagittarius. We're looking at the solar houses of the 3rd and 9th. And these houses have a lot to do with knowledge, experience, far horizons on the one hand, more localized experience on the other. This is an axis which is about logic versus faith. It's about objectivity and also subjectivity. They're always opposites with a full moon, and that's what we get when we look at these 3rd and 9th houses. But they're both seeking houses. So we could say that this full moon is about seeking knowledge and experience. Something on the one hand taking us out of ourselves, taking us out of our comfort zone, but at the same time something that is giving us knowledge that we can put to use in some way. So that's a kind of general theme about this full moon. And of course, it depends whether it's making a connection with your own natal chart, where it is in your chart, the houses of your chart, then that's also going to give us a stronger sense of what individual meaning this has for you. So let's not waste any more time. Let us go through sign by sign, and we will start with Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, for you, of course, the full moon, the moon itself is in your sign. And that means as we look at it in this chart, it's in your first solar house. And likewise, if you have Sagittarius rising, regardless of what your sun sign is, you'll have this moon cutting across the 1st and 7th houses. And we're always in relationshipville when we're looking at a full moon on the 1st and 7th axis. We could be looking at relationships in general. In other words, the impact other people have in your life. Remember, the sun is moving through this area for an extended period, 4 weeks. And so during that time, probably a little bit more sociable, meeting more people, having more important discussions, and making decisions either with other people or about other people. So when we come to the full moon, which is present just for a day, and we're looking here on the 11th of June, some things come to a head of a relationship nature. Whether you realize at this point, I've got to make a decision about whether I'm going to stay with this company, join this company, accept this job with this company, whether I'm going to stay in this relationship, whether I'm going to leave this relationship, whether I'm going to put a ring on it. There are all those kind of things that can come to a pressure point round about a full moon. Now, especially one on this 1st and 7th axis. Now, we have to remember that sometimes emotions get heightened by a full moon. So the good is fabulous and we're over the top happy, but it can also be the other way around. And if things have gone wrong or we're not particularly happy with things, then we can be really under the weather and definitely not a happy person at all. So in a way, although we want to close and complete on a full moon, what you may need to do on this instance is wait a day or two before you decide to sign on the dotted line, before you decide to walk away from that relationship, before you decide to put a ring on that relationship. Give it a couple of days. Let the moon get into Capricorn before you really put thoughts into action. It can also be that we feel a little bit overwhelmed about a relationship at this time. And of course, when we're overwhelmed, we don't think too well and we get things out of proportion. So it would be very good for you to say, Sagittarius, what's real here and what am I seeing through the prism of my emotions, because things get distorted that way. I do often say that when the full moon is in your sign, or indeed when the moon is in your sign, generally speaking, you're empowered because the moon harnesses emotions to consciousness, if you like, to conscious action. And when you put the two together, you get a sense of strong action. So, in many ways, with the moon in Sagittarius during this period, if you think about you're empowered, then it will make the things you're definitely sure about and the actions that you may have to take at this time, you should feel strongly about them. It's just the impulsive actions you need to be a little bit more careful. Those things that come up on the wave of a moment, is that really the right time to make that decision? Um, as you'll see, it's not really that close, but if you look at the planets that I've got in the circle and you look at the 5 o'clock position and you can see Saturn and Neptune there, the full moon isn't really squaring Saturn and Neptune. It's too far apart, but they're in sympathy with that. They're also a little bit in sympathy, that full moon, with the Jupiter and Mercury, which is just to the north of the sun. So this says to me that in certain circumstances, and for some Sagittarians, this is a really important moment. And what you need to know above all else are the true facts. Whatever you are doing, you can neither be carried away by the joy of the moment and the fact that other people are telling you things, whatever. You need to have solid facts. And if you have fact-backed action, all will be well. If you do things on the crest of an emotional wave, that may turn out to be not the right way forward. Okay, Sagittarius? So let's come to Capricorn now. And Capricorn, this full moon is cutting across the 6th and 12th houses. Sagittarius is the sign before yours, so the moon is in the 12th house. Now, let's have a look at the sun for a minute, because the sun has been moving through this area of your chart since about the 21st of May, and it will continue on through there until the 20th of June. And the 6th house is a very important area of the chart. I call this the engine of the chart. It's where things power forward. It's the thing that keeps everything going. We look at systems in the 6th house. We look at your health system. We look at your daily life system. We look at the things that keep your life running. So this full moon is going to show you what isn't running well and what needs attention. It may also be a time of conclusion, in the sense that something is over. If we look at the idea of your health system, for instance, does this mean a course of treatment is over? You're done with it. You've had this injury or this condition for a while and it's all over and done with now, all gone. Let's move forward. Or is it that this full moon highlights a condition or an injury? Is it that it makes you realize, oh my goodness, I need to get something done about this? And we need to think about dental health every bit as much as we think about mental health and physical health. So this full moon may illuminate a brewing problem. And of course, the answer is to get it seen to, get it done. But we're also thinking about the 6th house as the engine that drives our life ship. So we need to have money to put a roof over our heads and food on the table. So we then come to the idea of, how do you make money? Well, you make money through your work. So this full moon could show that you've come to the end of a job. Now, it may be just the end of a project you've been working on in a job. So you're on to something else within the same job. Or it could be the end of a job. This is done, dusted, over and done with. It's going to vary from Capricorn to Capricorn, but it is certainly a time when that kind of thing might be under consideration. And it's also a time when anything that isn't functioning well you're going to be super aware of. And we could look at workplace relationships. We could look at your general fitness. We could look at your life. How do you feel a life is going? And this full moon kind of illuminates what's wrong. Although, on the other hand, it could also illuminate what's right and give you a sense of my cup runneth over. Everything is so wonderful and perfect. But, let's be practical. Very few of us get those moments where we say, oh, isn't my life working well? I mean, really, there's always something not working. So this full moon is going to illuminate what needs to be adjusted and put back in balance. Remember that idea of oppositions. We need to find the balance in a situation. So maybe that is what I need to leave you with on this full moon, is the idea of bringing balance back to your life, finding balance in the situations that represent how your life runs. Okay, so if we come to Aquarius, this full moon is on the 5th, 11th axis. In other words, the moon itself is in the 11th house and the sun is in the 5th house. So for a while now, since about the 21st of May, the sun has been moving through the 5th house of creativity. This house has a lot to do with our inner child, and it has a lot to do with our real children. So this can be anything from having a lot to do with them, you're involved in their upbringing, or if they're grown-up children, you're hearing a lot about them. You've got stuff going on in the lives of your children which are involving you. On the other hand, you don't have children, you don't want children. So it's your inner child we're focusing on. And of course, you can focus on your inner child even if you are having a lot to do with your children as well. The inner child is really important. And it's that inner child that pops up at a time of a full moon at random. So your reaction to something, which might seem uncharacteristic to other people, like what's that all about? And you need to ask yourself that question as well. What was that about? Why am I having this overreaction to this set of circumstances, this person, whatever it may be? And that'll be an interesting answer. It'll be something in your childhood for sure. Or it may be the fact that in this life where we have so many responsibilities and there's so much going on all the time, that sometimes we forget to play. We forget that we've got this little inner person that really needs to find joy in life. So we need to address that part of ourselves that is our little self, and kind of deal with it. This axis has a lot to do with collaborations as well, whether we're talking about working with a lot of people or doing things with other people, being part of a group. But it can also be a one-on-one, like a love affair, something like that. So a love affair isn't really a collaboration, it's a romance. But what I was saying about this idea of new moon, full moon, we go back to the December of last year to this current period. Is there a connection between these two periods? Did a love affair begin back in December last year? And where are you with that love affair now? Has it blossomed and is ready to be something a lot more kind of permanent? Or are you now seeing all the cracks in that love affair and feeling, you know what, it isn't built to last? Well, this full moon may be just the very thing that really shows you that all things come to an end at some point. Nothing goes on forever. And that's that point. I also think, coming back to the idea of the child again, and the procreative aspect of this 5th house, it can bring up problems related to children. It can bring up problems related to pregnancy. So it's probably a good time if, for instance, you're pregnant, kind of take it easy. Don't stress yourself out. Don't do too much. And likewise, if the children are getting on top of you, and what children don't at times, then take a bit of a break. Let someone else do some of the heavy lifting while you come back to yourself. And maybe that's the actual real theme of this full moon across this axis, is coming back to yourself. Pisces. So for you, Pisces, this full moon is on one of the more important axes of your solar chart. It's on the axis of life direction. So we have career, your place in the world, the things that you do out in the world, versus your private life, your home, your family. So that's the axis, and the full moon on this axis means its theme of closure and completion applies to one or both of these areas. So, for instance, it could be a time when you've got packing boxes everywhere because you're moving home. On the other hand, it could be the other way round, and there are job changes. You're finishing off one job, beginning another, whether that means a totally new job or some new phase or responsibility in an existing job. And it's certainly a good time to bring things to a close that are really, they're sort of taking up a lot of space, mental space, psychic space in your life, getting rid of it so that you can focus a little more clearly on your aims, ambitions, and priorities. I often think that the full moon on this axis is about the work-life balance, so that it can't be imbalanced. You can't be all your energies into work and your responsibilities, making money, doing stuff that's, out there at the expense of your home life, of your family, of the roots of life. So getting in balance is very important. And this may be the whole purpose of the full moon, because it shows you what isn't in balance, what needs to be addressed. I think too, if you've got parents or, I think parents rather than relatives, just parents, there is something about the relationship with the parents on this full moon. And whether it takes you back, there's an incident or an event that takes you back to childhood and you find yourself acting like the child you were. I mean, it's there for a reason. When we're confronted with events that happen and we have an reaction to it, something that isn't great, that really is a flag up which says, what is this bringing out? What is this reminding of you? Reminding you of? Is this taking you back to a childhood when you had no power and you felt powerless, and how angry that made you? So is the situation that causes the abreaction related to that? If it does, you've got to the nub of it, and therefore there can be closure about it. On the other hand, there could be a problem with a parent, whether there's an argument and an upset, or whether you're worried about a parent. There are things going on in a parent's life that are really concerning you. Well, those things are what they are, and it's down to you as to how you deal with them. But remember, this full moon is making you super aware of what's going on, and you are more emotional about it, and that it might be better to wait a couple of days to get the moon out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn for you to think, oh, you know what, that was a bit OTT. I probably need to do this, that, and the other. So remember, when there's a full moon around, we do feel much more emotional, and things can get distorted. And just keep asking yourself about any situation, is this just my reaction to it because it's a full moon and I'm a bit overwhelmed? Or is it justified? I mean, maybe it is, but often just leaving the situation for a day or so can make a big difference to the future outcome. I think just before I leave you, Pisces, this full moon, as I said, is an important one because it's on this important axis. And I want to say to you, don't be afraid to make a really big decision. Often we're sort of compromised because we think about, other people, how our actions will impact other people. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but on this occasion, it may be more important to do the right thing for you. You have to be right here on this full moon. So make the hard decision, the right decision, whatever it is. That's the important thing. Okay. So Aries, well, this is one of the nicer full moons of the year for you. It's on the third ninth axis. And remember, I talked about that at the beginning of this video about knowledge and experience. The moon itself is in the area of far horizons. So we think about travel. So is it a period of the year in which you're going to be traveling, or one where you're thinking about travel later in the year? Or is it a time when you're reaching out to other people who live in different countries? Or are you mixing and mingling with different cultures and being exposed to all sorts of things that are kind of, blowing your mind, opening your mind? As I said, I quite like this full moon for what it brings in the sense of knowledge and experience. It's going to open the world up to you. I think at the same time, you need to gain distance and perspective. So if there's something that's bothering you and you're obsessing about it and you're thinking, oh goodness, I've got to resolve this, or I wish this would stop, or I wish this would happen, then what you've got to do is gain distance and perspective. It's a bit like when you think about if you're in a town and when you're in that town and all you see are the buildings and the cars and the people on the streets and the noise and everything. Well, if you were to go up to a mountaintop and look at the town from the top of that mountain, you wouldn't hear any of that. You just see the town in the context of everything else surrounding it. And that's a really, really important thing to do, Aries, with almost everything that's bothering you at this time. Get distance and perspective. And certainly at the time of the full moon itself, which remember is the 11th of June, if something frustrates you, something happens, don't react immediately. Of course, you'll have a response to it. You can't control how you feel about something, but what you can control is what you do about it. So do nothing in the heat of the moment. And even if you get incredibly good news or something wonderful is happening to you, do your best. If you're going to make a really important decision or you've got to do something that demands focus, let those feelings come down to a kind of manageable level before you go do those kind of things. This is probably thinking about travel, although there is a lot about travel at this time, and the idea of maybe thinking about it later in the year or maybe traveling hither and thither at this particular June period may be in there. The full moon itself, the 11th, isn't always the best day to travel. So if you are traveling, do all the things that we would do on, let's say, a retrograde Mercury. Leave early. Don't leave at the things till the last minute. Take a whole lot of things that are backups. And if a flight gets cancelled or, you get held up in traffic, do your best to chill because you can't do anything about these things. And 1,000 to 1, you will get there in the end. And that's the thing to remember. I think a lot of stuff when we've got third house, ninth house going on, it can be that we're a little bit detached from reality. In a good way, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of learning to be done. So sometimes the things that happen to us bring us down to earth. And Aries, remember, especially if you're a March Aries, you've got Saturn and Neptune on your case. So you are a little bit detached from reality from time to time. So if you sense that, make sure that you are anchored to reality at the time of this full moon. And one last thing to say about this full moon, contracts. You may be signing a contract or signing off on a contract. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Closure, completion, that's what it's all about. And a contract may be involved, or even a legal letter or a legal thing may be involved in this full moon. And thinking about that, don't run a red light. Okay, my last word of advice to you. Taurus, the full moon for you is on the axis of finance and self-worth. The sun is in the area of the self. So this is all about your earnings. This is all about your value. This is about finding stability, creating security in your life, and doing things that make you feel as though you're getting somewhere. Your feet are on the ground. You know, you've got substance in your life. That's the sun moving through this area is about getting those things in place. You put a full moon there, and you either get the end of some kind of dialogue. Perhaps you've been discussing a contract, or you've been negotiating a salary, or you and a partner have been discussing how much to spend on something, or whether to go away on holiday, whatever it is, it's got money in there. So this full moon can bring an end to that dialogue. So you end up with a decision, it's all done. Or when we think about this full moon representing union and separation, there could be a financial issue which really separates you. So there is division, differences of opinion, and a sense, in some cases, that a financial matter has reached a little bit of a crisis point. Now, of course, when things reach a crisis point, they have to be attended to. So whether you've got a bit of a cash flow crisis, or you've got some kind of issue about who pays for what and what is justified, the fact it's come to a crisis point on the full moon means it can be resolved. But as always with full moons, it's better not to allow our emotions to interfere with our decision making. So if you can hold off for a day or two after the full moon, when it comes to signing on the dotted line or doing something like that, do so. Make that kind of decision when you're feeling calm and collected and all the emotional aspect to it has dissipated. And of course, you know, we can have something wonderful happen to us financially. We can, you know, win some money. We can be given a settlement or an inheritance, which is, you know, a great thing. But at the same time, we're probably not thinking straight when that happens. So you don't want to be making decisions until the dust has settled a bit. But this axis isn't just about money. It isn't just about your assets, your material assets. It is also about your value as a person. And it's about intimacy. So you could have two different themes going here. We could have the idea that you are feeling as though you are connecting with someone in that very intimate way that makes you feel thoroughly acknowledged. It's a beautiful feeling. That full moon has brought that about. But on the other hand, it can be the reverse, and you can really regret the lack of intimacy in a relationship. And maybe that's something that you really need to think about a lot, because when we're in a long-term relationship and intimacy isn't there, it's very difficult to get that relationship to run well. It's a bit like an engine running without oil. It gets a little clunky. So there's a reason you've reached that point, and that needs to be explored and dealt with. It's about reciprocity, really, isn't it? That the eighth house is about receivership, what you receive. And also, I think there's one thing I haven't mentioned here as well, this idea of signing contracts and doing deals. The eighth house, where the moon is, the full moon is about the relationships we have with credit card companies and banks and lending institutions. So it's either a time when you reach that crisis point, like I can't go on paying these high interest rates, or it's a point where you think, okay, let's do a deal here. Let's sort this. So yes, on the one level, it is about the practical side of, you know, roof over your head, assets, finance, but it's deeper than that. It's about your value as a person and just how connected you feel to someone in that very intimate way. So these are the full moon issues for you. Okay, Taurus? So Gemini, the full moon in Sagittarius, and the same if you have Gemini rising. In your opposite sign, we've got the axis of relationships really in full view with this full moon. So the moon is just a transient passenger through this area. The sun at the moment is in your sign, it's in your first house. So the emphasis when the sun is in your sign is about what's going on with you. It's about your personal aims. It's about your appearance. It's about you very, very personally. Everything is personal. So this stretch of time from the 21st of May through to the 20th of June puts you in the spotlight, and issues related to who you are at core level and all sorts of issues related to how you come across to other people, how you present yourself, that image looking back at you in the mirror, which is why it's so crucial to feel the image coming back to you in the mirror is positive. And the the impression you're getting when you're out and about with other people is beamed back at you in the sense that you're liked and that things are going well. So it is you personally. And this is how it should be at this point, because only you can do something about things, let's say, to do with your appearance or to do with your relationship with other people. You're here. This is you. You know, if you want things to change, you don't like what you're looking at, then it's down to you to do something about it. Now we come to the full moon, and here we have, a relationship in the mix. So this becomes a time of closure and completion in the sense that you and another person are complete. And how do we complete that? Well, we make a decision to be with that person. We decide to marry them, get engaged to them. There's that sense of completion. But there's also a sense that we're done and dusted, that a relationship has gone as far as it can go. And again, let's look back at what I was saying at the beginning of this video, that the new moon on the 1st of December is part of the full moon story of the 11th of June. So what began in December is now ready to be seen for what it is, and therefore decisions can be made in the wake of it. As always with full moons, there's a lot of emotion. It ups the emotional ante. So you may not be as clear-minded as you usually are. Well, there's a reason for that. We feel what we feel, and we have to acknowledge that. That is how it feels. But what we do have control over is what we do. So that if we are feeling stressed out or we're very angry and upset, it's probably not a good plan to act on that full moon feeling. We need to let it settle and then think, do I really want that person to not be in my life anymore? Or maybe I was a little hasty. Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. But there are all sorts of relationships, aren't there? There's not just marital relationships, romantic relationships. There's friendships, there's business partnerships, there's your relationship with a company. So this full moon could be all of those things. It's throwing a spotlight on a relationship, and it's really saying how happy and in balance is this relationship? How is this person impacting my life? Is it to the good or quite the reverse? And so this full moon really highlights all of that. It's about endings and beginnings, closure and completion. And also, I think about you in terms of what you want out of life, who you are. And that in relation to how other people treat you, how things are in a relationship, that's the question. That's what the full moon is throwing up. Cancer. When we look at this full moon picture, we can see the sun in that sort of 9 o'clock position in the 12th house of the horoscope, and the moon is in the 6th house. So the bigger emphasis, if you like, is the fact that the sun is moving through the 12th house in preparation for coming into your own sign on the 20th of June. And the interesting thing is that if you look below the sun onto the 9 o'clock position there in the chart, you'll see the symbol for Jupiter and the symbol for Mercury. So this really is a boom time for Cancerians. I mean, Jupiter entering your own sign, it came in on the 9th of June. And of course, I'm going to be doing a separate video on that. But it is a really, for the next 12 months to have Jupiter moving through your sign, there is going to be at least one period which you would say is fantastic. It's happy, it's successful, it's lots of things that life gives back to you with Jupiter in your sign. And of course, if you're a June-born Cancerian, you're going to have that experience now. And certainly, in June and July. So already you may be feeling the sense of your cup runneth over. But let's get back to the full moon again and the transit of the sun through the 12th house. When the sun is in the 12th house, it is a time of retreat, or it should be. Now, of course, nobody can live their lives perfectly according to the cosmic clock. It's not possible. We have busy lives, we have responsibilities, we have work, we have family, all of that kind of stuff, which means we can't just check out. But what we can do is accommodate what's being asked of us when we look at the astrology, which is to take a little bit more time out, put in a few early nights to cut down the noise of life, put that phone out of the room, put it away for a day even, smell the roses, whatever it is the 12th house is about. Life without the noise. One of the reasons that, I emphasize retreat and rest is that when we do that, our unconscious mind, can function well. And the dialogue between our conscious mind and our unconscious mind is very important, because the unconscious mind picks up what we can't pick up consciously. So in dreams and in those hours when we're either waking or just going to sleep, or when we've cut down the noise of life, we get an understanding, or we suddenly feel, oh, I get it, or do you know, I've missed that, but now I see it. And we tend to allow that to happen more if we've got a lot of rest. So that's why I emphasize this with the 12th house transit. But we're coming to this full moon and we're thinking, does this full moon mark that moment of illumination? Is it that time when suddenly you think, oh my goodness, now I see the light. I've got it. What it can also do is make you aware of something you've been completely unaware of. And because this axis of the horoscope is the health and well-being axis, it may be that you are alerted to something in your dental health or your mental health or your physical health that you need to pay attention to. Something needs sorting. But it can also be the end of treatment. So if you have been under a course of dental treatment, for instance, it's over, it's done with, that's all well and good now. And it may be the same for an injury or some other condition, that the full moon marks the end of it. It's done, it's over now. But I would certainly, as far as, using this kind of advice that I'm giving you. I think if you do feel that there's something not right, it is time to take it to the professionals. This is what that full moon is all about. It's about illumination. Another area that this part of the horoscope is about work. And there could be a little bit of a work crisis around this time, whether you feel you're job hunting, you're looking for something, and you feel overwhelmed by everything that's going on, or whether something in the workplace brings a situation to a crisis point. And it's that point that things get resolved. And never forget that. When things reach a crisis, when things reach a peak, it's time for resolution. And for that reason alone, this new moon can come in very useful. Last but not least, you can probably see Saturn and Neptune right up there at the top of this solar chart in the 10th house position. And of course, you can see Jupiter and Mercury quite close to that. The Sun is going to join up with the Jupiter and Mercury during the course of June. And this is going to make this a crucial period for your future. I've given you a little bit more information on the mundane version of this full moon, which you might find very interesting. But I want to give you this sense of dreams being realized or dreams being broken. That's it in a nutshell. So this period of time around the full moon and going into later in the month when the sun comes into your sign, this is all about fantasy versus reality. It's about what's really going on, what is real and good, and what is negative and not good. So those are just extra bits of information for you, Cancer. So Leo, this full moon cuts across the creative axis of your horoscope. The sun has been in the area of collaborations for, well, the past couple of weeks, went in there on the 21st of May, and is going to take right through until the 20th of June to complete itself. So the main trend is about collaborations. And of course, we can collaborate at work in the sense of doing things in teams and getting team spirit. And we can also do it socially. And that means there are events where lots of people are gathered, and whether you're putting events together or you're joining in with them, there is that sense it's you among a lot of people. It's always important with our 11th house transits that we feel that we have a kindred spirit somewhere, or we are with kindred spirits. I mean, that gives us a sense of coming home, doesn't it? So doing things with other people that are sharing something essential to your worldview is really important with an 11th house transit of the sun. And that's where a large focus should be. I mean, it may be that you've got all sorts of things. You're going on courses. You've got all sorts of things going on with people who do the same thing as you or share the same views. So it's already in the process of becoming. And now we come to the full moon. So we come to that full moon sense of things being at full tilt. Everything is wonderful, beautiful. I'm really feeling it. To the absolute opposite, where things couldn't get much worse. So you've got two ways of looking at this. Is it that at this full moon time, you realize how lucky you are, and that the events that you're involved with, the endeavors that you are working with other people in, there's a real sense of unity, of coming together, and a sense that this is really good, this is what it's all about? Or is it that things, and we all get this when we're working with a group of people, not everybody is on the same page, and there can always be somebody who is making things very difficult for everyone else. And is it that at the time of the full moon, you're with somebody who really is making things very, very difficult, and instead of being able to say, well, c'est la vie, let's just get on with it, what happens instead is that things get very fiery, and things do get to a point, a tipping point. Well, it is what it is. But as always, we have to recognize that our emotions are justified. Nobody can tell you how to feel. You feel how you feel. And recognizing that and accepting it is important. What you do about it, though, how you behave, is something that you need to think about. Okay, we can all get annoyed, frustrated, overwhelmed, but we don't, all of us, have to throw our toys out of the pram and the baby out with the bathwater. We don't have to do that. And I think when we look at some of the other things happening, there's a Venus-Pluto square, there's, Mercury, Saturn, Mercury, Neptune, there's a lot of muddying of the water here. It might be possible, Leo, that you've misunderstood the situation, you've got it wrong, and that your version of events is actually not real. And, save yourself some hassle by not overreacting. And that's not to say you're not justified in your feelings, it's just more about acting on them. Now, the full moon itself can also be the end of a gestation period. And if you listen to the first part of this video, I talked about going back to December the 1st and the new moon in Sagittarius at that point. Did something begin at that point so that it has reached an end or a sort of terminus? Is it at a point where, it can move on, but on a different, in a different way? Or is it that that's over? And of course, that applies very easily to a relationship, whether it's a working relationship or it's a romantic relationship that may have begun in the December period. Is it time now to see, can this continue? Is this good for both of us? Can we make something of this, or has it reached the end of its natural life? And another thing here about gestation periods is the literal interpretation of a gestation period, 9 months and a little human being at the end of it. So this could well apply to the idea of a new baby about to come into the world, whether that's yours or whether you're going to be a grandparent or a godparent, something like that. Or it could be, something to do with your own children. So something happening to a child, whether it's a young child or whether it's a grown-up child, that marks some kind of conclusion. It's like, oh, this is a happy ending here. All of these things are worth looking at when we see a full moon on this axis. But one last point I should raise here, and it goes about, well, it's along the same lines as being overwhelmed by something. There is a division, really, within ourselves about our small self, our small inner child, if you like, and our bigger self, our grown-up self, our higher self. And the balance between that is crucial at the time of this full moon. And we always want to take the higher path and look at a situation from a higher perspective. But you know what? We can't do that at the expense of our inner child and that smaller person inside. That too needs to be addressed. So Virgo, this full moon is on a very important axis of your solar chart. It's on the axis of life direction. So on the one hand, we've got things to do with your career and all those things that are about you out in the world. And the opposite point is all about your home life. It's about your inner sanctuary, your private life, the things that matter to you on a very, very personal and private level. So this full moon, being a time of closure and completion, can actually be a point of great joy in the sense that you're feeling that you have life in perfect balance. On the other hand, this full moon might be a sign that life is not in perfect balance and that something probably, well, it can either be your career on the one hand or the things you do out in the world, they're too great and they're at the expense of your home life and your nearest and dearest and your privacy and your subjective self. It's the balance is wrong. And the full moon really makes this clear so that you can address the balance. And I mean, all full moons are polarities. This is what I talked about, the idea of union and division that's inherent in a full moon, happy endings and not so happy endings. So there is the potential here for that sense of everything in balance, that you've got things perfect, but there's also the sense that maybe something is out of whack now and really, really needs to be brought back in balance. Now, the sun has been moving through the 10th house since the 21st of May. So there is a focus on your career, if you have one, and if you don't have a career, you don't want one, that's not necessary. You still have a life out in the world. You still do things out there. You're an out there person, as opposed to what you do when you're at home with your nearest and dearest and things of a private nature. So the sun is urging you to get out and urging you to focus on things that make your material world stronger, make your reputation bigger and better, to deal with superiors, authority figures, bureaucracy, all of that kind of thing. When the sun goes through the 10th house, that's where your focus is. That's where stuff happens. But of course, the moon, when it becomes a full moon, is in the area of home and family. That's why I'm looking at getting the balance right. But I think it also may have to do with parents and children here. So is it that there's something going on with a parent or something going on with a child, and that it's a bit of a crisis? Now, of course, a crisis, even though we don't necessarily like things coming to a crisis, they're very useful, because it's at that point we do something about it and we have to resolve the crisis. So something that's been brewing for a while, to do with a member of the family, particularly a parent or maybe a child, this is now the time when it needs to be addressed, something done about it. And I'm leaving it open because there are just so many ways that this could be interpreted. I also want to look at a little bit some of the other things that are going on here. And I'm thinking about that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the 8th house there. I think one of the other things that may be of interest to you at this time is your relationship with banks and lending institutions, credit card companies. Is there a feeling that your well-being and your future is greatly affected by some kind of financial matter? And could it be that by discussing it with people who have a share in your financial future, is this the answer to getting things back in balance in your life? I'm just throwing it out there. It's just something I thought of as I looked at this general picture here. Libra, full moon time. And this full moon is on the axis of travel and communication. So a journey is in here, whether it's a journey in miles or whether it's a journey in experience. And a full moon gives the sense of an ending. So you've been on a journey for a while and it's come to an end. Now, there's just so many journeys in life. I know that when I write a book or an article, for instance, it's a journey. I've started somewhere, I've got a rough idea where I'm heading, but hello, the journey is somewhat different, and now I've come to the end and this is what I got. So lots of things can be journeys. They don't really have to be journeys in miles. And by the way, if you are traveling on the 11th of June, the date of this full moon, what I would say to you is be prepared for delays and diversions, a little bit like a retrograde Mercury. You need to leave early for your destination or your port of departure. Allow more time. And also remember, people are going to be not so well behaved on a full moon. So people are going to be stressed out. And just being prepared for that on full moon day can make the difference between a really successful journey and one that is just stressful from start to finish. So sometimes knowing what's ahead and what things are like can be enormously useful, and in dealing with something a lot better. And of course, this idea of meetings, communication, dialogues, discussions. Full moon day can be a little difficult for discussions, and they can easily get out of hand because people can get very polarized. And when that happens, finding a compromise, getting the middle point of that can be really difficult on a full moon. And so probably if you do have a big meeting planned for that particular day, or you've got, or something starts happening on that day with a discussion and you can see where it's going, agree to disagree rather than trying to get something knocked out of the park at that time. It may be better just to let emotions settle, and so you can come back at another time where it will be easier to get consensus. So I'm going to just drop that in there. Now, another thing about this third ninth axis is about journeys in knowledge and experience. And this might come at a time when you're taking an exam, for instance, that you come to the end of learning about something, of studying, and that's it. The test of your knowledge is here. So that might apply, and maybe that's a good thing, and you feel you've accomplished something. Or maybe you'll feel a little bit stressed out because, like all of us, when we take an exam or we come to the end of something, we always think about what we didn't do and what we might have got wrong. But it is what it is, and the full moon is bringing an end to that. But I think also what this full moon is doing is saying, Libra, it's time to get distance and perspective on things. The way we live, so much going on in our lives, it's easy to get kind of myopia about things, tunnel vision, and we're not able to make good judgments or see things reasonably when we're in that headspace. So if that seems to be an issue and you're recognizing, you know what, I got a bit of tunnel vision going on here, distance and perspective is what you need. And sometimes physically removing yourself from that situation, going to a different village, moving to a different room, the garden, whatever, taking yourself to a different space in order to look at what is bothering you. That's the thing to do. Aim to get that distance and perspective. It'll make a big difference to how outcomes happen. Okay, Libra? Scorpio, my last sign on this odyssey through the full moon in Sagittarius. So for you, this full moon is taking place in your second house, second solar house, the sun being in the 8th solar house. So we are in the axis of finance and self-worth. Hugely important. Let's take the sun first of all, because it's the sun that is moving through the 8th house. The 8th house is about other people's involvement in your financial affairs. It's about your relationship with other people. And when I say other people, I mean more about people who are very close to us. And we're talking about partners more than anything else. So it's about intimacy as well. So the whole time the sun is moving through the 8th house, and it began on the 21st of May, and it's going to be leaving this area of the chart on the 20th of June. So the whole of this time is an important time for discussion with banks and lending institutions, credit card companies. It's about salaries and income, investments. So the whole period should be a focus on that kind of thing. But of course, we get to a full moon and things become a lot more important. So you get to a point where you can sign on the dotted line. So you're going to sign an agreement. Maybe you're selling a property or purchasing something, and it requires signatures on paper. That's a good thing. That's what closure and completion is meant to be on this full moon. But it can be more than that. And for some Scorpios, we're looking at an inheritance, so that, things are done and dusted now. And, however or whatever that means to you in terms of what you are receiving. I mean, I'm going to leave it open, but it's in there. There is a sense of a settlement. There is a sense of unearned income here. Maybe that full moon will coincide with a great good fortune, in the sense of winning something or receiving something from someone else that's great and good. It may be. But on the other hand, that full moon might bring a financial matter to crunch point. Whether outgoings have exceeded incomings and you've got a bit of a cash flow crisis, has to be dealt with. But I mentioned that word intimacy, didn't I, a little while ago? And for some Scorpios, this full moon and the transit of the sun through the 8th house isn't really about money. It isn't about stability in the sense of a roof over your head and, 4 square walls, a good job, whatever it may be. It's about being addressed at that fundamental level. When we find intimacy with someone, when someone reaches our innermost core and there's reciprocity there, there's nothing like it. It is such a sense of such a bond. And that's what we strive for, in a way, in a relationship. That kind of relationship. We want to feel intimate and addressed at our very private selves. We want that. So if we haven't got it, that becomes a problem. And this may be one of the things about this full moon, is that any sense that there is a lack of intimacy in a relationship that should have intimacy needs addressing. And I'm just going to leave it like that. Whether you address it on your own and think, I've got to face this, this is not what I hoped for, this is not working for me, so you are facing it yourself, or whether it is the time to address it, talk about it, and to do something about it. But yes, intimacy can't be pushed under the carpet. It's something that makes a relationship thrive or can bring it to its knees. So a lot of things about this full moon. On the surface level, we're looking at finance, investments, sales, purchases, contracts. But on a whole other level, we're looking at emotional contracts and intimacy. So that is all 12 signs done and dusted. And, full moons are a great time to really examine certain aspects of our existence. Something will come up around the time of a full moon, and we'll feel it very intensely. But it's that recognition of whatever has come up, that we're looking at it, we're dealing with it, we're addressing it, is really important. And we get closure, we get completion when we do address it. And yes, sometimes at full moon, something will go wrong. We'll have something go wrong with an appliance, a device, and that stresses us out because we can't do what we expected to do. Sometimes it's about people, and we realize we just don't get on with certain people, or there are issues with people that are causing us to not feel great about being with them. So full moons bring all these things up to the surface in various ways for all of us. But I think, and I seem to remember saying this to Leo in particular, and it's about feelings. How we feel is how we feel. And that's how we feel. We can't change it. If we feel this way, we have to acknowledge that's how we feel. It's no good trying to say, oh, I shouldn't feel this way about that. That's wrong. Or I've got to feel differently about A, B, and C. No, you can only feel what you feel. And acknowledging how you feel is important. But, and here's the but, how you deal with it, what you do about it, is something that requires thought and sometimes requires doing perhaps differently from the way you would have done it in the heat of the moment. Sometimes we do things and it feels great to do that, say that, be that. But then in the wake of it, we realize, oh dear, that wasn't too good. So it's one thing to feel, another thing what you do about those feelings. And that's what I'm going to leave you with at this time. Thank you for being with me. I hope it's been a help, insightful, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.